Where are you keeping him?
What are you talking about?
Talking about the dog.
Is it bad?
It's not that deep, but man, someone beat the shit out of this dog.
So what do you think?
Brooklyn, winter, the kind of cold that makes the whole neighborhood feel dead. A quiet bartender named Bob Saganowski is walking home alone when he hears something crying inside a trash can. Inside is a pit bull puppy, covered in blood, barely alive. Somebody beat this dog nearly to death, then threw it away like garbage. Most people would have kept walking. Bob doesn't. A woman named Nadia watches from her doorway as Bob lifts the shaking puppy into his arms, like it already belongs to him. And for the first time all night, Bob actually speaks.
This one's bleeding.
What's your name?
He asks her for a blanket. That should have been the end of it. But a few weeks later, a man named Eric knocks on Bob's door and says something that changes everything. The dog belongs to him. Not only that, Eric admits he was the one who threw it in the trash, and he wants it back. Now here's the strange part. Eric is dangerous. Everyone in Brooklyn knows that. Everyone also knows Cousin Marv's bar, the kind of place connected to very, very bad people. And Bob works there every single night. But when Eric starts threatening him, Bob doesn't react, doesn't panic, doesn't negotiate. He just stares at him, like a man who's hiding something much worse, because nobody in this neighborhood actually knows who Bob Saganowski really is. And by the time they finally figure it out, it's already too late. If you love slow-burn crime films with hidden monsters hiding behind ordinary faces, subscribe, because this movie turns one quiet bartender into the most terrifying man in Brooklyn.
She's my girl.
Before we get to Eric Deeds, you need to understand the world Bob lives in. Cousin Marv's bar sits on a corner in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. It looks like any other neighborhood bar. Old stools, dim lights, a TV nobody watches. But Cousin Marv's is what people in organized crime call a drop bar. On certain nights, specific, pre-arranged nights, large sums of cash move through that bar. Criminal money, untraceable money. The bar doesn't belong to Marv anymore, even though his name is still on the sign. The Chechens took it from him years ago. A crew led by a man named Chovka. Marv still runs the place, still stands behind the bar, but he answers to people who don't ask twice. Bob tends bar, takes orders, wipes counters, and then one night, two men walk in wearing ski masks. They vault the bar, they put a gun to Marv's head, and they walk out with $5,000 from the register. Gone in under 4 minutes. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Because $5,000 means nothing to the Chechens. What matters to them is the principle. Someone robbed their bar. Someone disrespected their operation. Chovka comes in the next day. No yelling, no threats, just a calm, quiet conversation that somehow feels worse than a threat. He tells Marv the money needs to come back. All of it. And if it doesn't, Marv pays it out of his own pocket. Marv doesn't have $5,000. Marv doesn't have $500. He's been running this bar for years, and he has almost nothing to show for it. The door just closed. Now, Detective Torres starts coming around the bar, asking questions about the robbery. Routine investigation, that's what he says. But Torres keeps circling back to something else. A 10-year-old murder case. A man named Glory Days, real name Richard Whelan, who disappeared from this neighborhood a decade ago. Never found, never solved. Torres looks at Bob when he asks about it. Not at Marv, not at the other regulars. At Bob. Bob answers every question the same way. Steady, slow, polite. I don't know anything about that, detective. Meanwhile, Marv is quietly losing his mind. Because the robbery wasn't random. Marv knew about it. He fed information to the two robbers, a petty criminal named Rardy and his partner. He thought he could skim from the Chechens, blame outsiders, and walk away clean. He thought he was finally making a move. He thought wrong. And now he's stuck between the Chechens demanding money and the police circling his bar, with absolutely no way out that doesn't destroy him. Bob watches all of this, says nothing, goes home, feeds Rocco, goes to Mass. And here's something worth noting because it's actually important. The reason bars like Marv's exist in the first place isn't just greed. It's geography. It's community. It's the way certain neighborhoods become ecosystems that criminal networks rely on because law enforcement can't penetrate the social fabric. Drop bars are a real thing. They operate because everybody knows everybody. And that same loyalty that protects families also protects crime. And Bob understands that better than anyone. He just never talks about it.
Dog. Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a nice looking dog, man.
Eric Deeds comes back. Not once, multiple times. He shows up at Nadia's house. He shows up near the bar. He's not threatening Bob directly. Not yet. He's doing something smarter and more unsettling. He's circling, getting closer each time, watching how Bob reacts, testing the temperature. And the more Bob learns about Eric Deeds, the stranger the picture gets. Because Eric Deeds isn't just a random guy who threw a dog in a trash can. Eric Deeds has a reputation. People in the neighborhood say Eric Deeds killed a man. Not allegedly. People say it like it's a fact, the way you say someone got married or moved to Jersey. And that man he supposedly killed? Glory days. Richard Whelan. The same unsolved murder Detective Torres keeps bringing up. So now the picture shifts. Eric isn't just a nuisance. Eric is a man who has killed before, who is now inserting himself into Bob's life, Bob's dog, Bob's only real human connection, Nadia. Bob tells Nadia. Nadia already knows, because Nadia and Eric have a history, an ugly one. She says it quietly, without details, in the way people describe things they've survived rather than things that happened to them. Eric controlled her, frightened her, left marks, and now he's back because something in him, some animal instinct, sensed that she had something good, and he wants to take it. Bob starts paying closer attention, not in a dramatic way, not in a movie way, in a very Bob way, quietly, completely, without anyone noticing he's doing it. Bob watches how Eric moves, where he shows up, what he reacts to, and he notices something. Eric is not actually dangerous the way people think he is. Eric is reckless. Eric is impulsive. Eric runs on ego and bravado. Real danger is quieter than that. Here's something genuinely fascinating about criminal psychology, and this connects directly to what's happening in this story. Research consistently shows that the most dangerous people in any environment are almost never the loudest ones in the room. The ones who talk about violence, usually performing. The ones who are actually capable of it, they've already thought through every step. They don't need to announce it. They wait for the moment it becomes necessary. Eric Deeds announces. Bob waits. Meanwhile, Rocco is doing exactly what you'd expect a rescued pit bull to do. He's healing, getting bigger, getting stronger, responding to the one person who treats him like he matters. And Bob, for possibly the first time in his adult life, has something that needs him back. Marv isn't done. He hatches Another plan. The Super Bowl is coming. Every year on Super Bowl Sunday, Cousin Marv's bar is the official drop point for the Chechen operation in Brooklyn. Huge amounts of cash flow through that bar on that one night. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Conspiratorially, in the dark, Marv has been thinking about what he lost, what the Chechens took from him. His bar, his status, his name on the wall of something that used to belong to him. He makes contact with people. He has a new plan to rob the drop. Make it look like an outside job, walk away with the money, and disappear before the Chechens trace it back. Dark, he doesn't tell Bob. He doesn't ask Bob because Marv knows if he tells Bob, Bob will say no. And something in Marv doesn't want to hear Bob say no, because deep down, Marv has always been slightly afraid of Bob. He doesn't know exactly why. Calm, it's just a feeling he's carried for years, like standing near a fireplace that looks cold but radiates heat when you get too close. Serious. Bob finds out anyway, deadpan, not through any dramatic confrontation. He just notices things, connects dots, dark, intense, and when the picture comes together, calm. He says nothing, narrator tone. He just watches, whispering, and waits. Serious, narrator tone. Eric Deeds makes his move. He shows up at the bar one afternoon while it's quiet, just him and Bob, intense. He sits down at the bar and lays it out very simply. He wants $10,000 in exchange for walking away from Rocco, from Nadia, from all of it. $10,000 and Eric Deeds disappears from their lives. Villain tone. He says it the way men say things when they're used to being believed. Narrator tone. Bob listens, doesn't react, calmly asks Eric if he wants a drink. Sarcastically, Eric takes that as weakness. Intense, he leans forward. He says the number again. Dark, he mentions Nadia. Villain tone, he mentions what he's capable of. Serious, he mentions glory days. Dramatic, not as a confession. Villain tone, as a credential. Intense, look what I did. Look what I'm willing to do. Calm, deadpan. Bob wipes the bar, tells Eric he'll think about it. Eric leaves satisfied. Intense, and here's where you need to pay close attention. Inhale sharply, because what just happened is not what it looked like. Calm. Bob didn't agree. Serious. Bob didn't back down. Intense. Bob bought time. Narrator tone. There's a difference. Somber. And the fact that Eric couldn't see that difference, dark, whispering, is the most important thing in this entire story. Nadia finds out Eric came to the bar. She's terrified. Not for herself. She's lived through Eric before and survived. She's terrified for Bob because she's started to understand something about this quiet man who rescued a broken dog from a trash can and brings her coffee and goes to Mass every Sunday. She's started to understand that Bob carries something heavy and unspoken, something he's been carrying for a very long time. She asks him, gently, if he's okay. Bob says yes. She asks him if he's scared of Eric. Bob pauses, and then he says something that stops her completely. He says, "I'm not sure I feel things the way other people do." He says it without sadness, without drama, just a quiet man making a quiet observation about himself, like he's been looking at the same thing for years and finally decided to say it out loud. It's one of the most unsettling lines in the entire film, because it's not a confession of emptiness, it's a confession of something else, something controlled, contained, waiting. Nadia doesn't fully understand it in that moment, but the audience does. Super Bowl Sunday arrives. The bar is packed. The game's on every screen. People are drinking, eating, arguing about the spread. Conspiratorially, Shofka and his crew arrive quietly and set up the operation in the back. The drop is happening tonight. Hundreds of thousands of dollars cycling through Cousin Marv's on a busy Sunday night while nobody looks twice because there's a football game on. Marv is running his own play simultaneously. The people he contacted are supposed to move during halftime. He's been planning this for weeks. He's convinced himself it's airtight. And then Eric Deeds walks through the door. Not because he was invited, not because of the robbery, because of Bob. He wants his $10,000 tonight. He pulls Bob into the back. He has a gun. He says he'll hurt Nadia if Bob doesn't pay. He says he'll expose everything. He's loud and erratic, convinced that he's holding every card in the deck. Nadia looks at Bob, and something in Bob's face goes still. Not afraid, not calculating, just still. Like water goes still before it freezes solid. Bob reaches under the bar. He comes up with a paper bag. He slides it to Eric. Eric opens it. Cash. All of it. Eric almost can't believe it. He laughs. He tells Bob he knew he was smart. He starts talking about Nadia, about how maybe he'll still go see her anyway, just for old time's sake. And then he looks at Bob, and Bob is looking back at him, and Eric, for the very first time, sees something he doesn't understand, and somewhere deep in his nervous system, some ancient animal part of his brain sends an alarm. Too late. Bob shoots him once, point blank, in the head. Eric Deeds is dead before he hits the floor. Bob stands over him for a moment. No shaking, no gasping. Just a man who did what needed to be done. And here's the thing about what you just witnessed, and this matters because this is the part most people miss when they first watch this film. Bob wasn't protecting himself. Bob wasn't even protecting Nadia in the reactive sense. Bob made a decision, a calm, considered, premeditated decision. He'd already thought through exactly how this night would end the moment Eric sat down at that bar and said $10,000. That's not instinct, that's character. And character, as psychologists and criminologists will tell you, is the most consistent predictor of behavior in high-pressure situations. People don't become someone else when things get dangerous. They become more of who they already were. Bob was always this. He just never needed to show it. Marv's plan falls apart, not because of Bob, because the Chechens already knew. They'd been watching Marv for weeks. They knew about his contacts, his conversations, his plan. They let it get far enough to confirm it, and then Chovka has a quiet conversation with Marv in the back room while the bar is still full of Super Bowl noise. The camera doesn't show you what happens. You just see the door close, and then you see Bob behind the bar, watching that door. He knows what's happening behind it. He knew before tonight that Marv had made a fatal mistake, and he let it happen. Because Bob loved Marv. They grew up together. They have history together. But Bob also understands, in that clear, emotionless way he understands everything, that Marv chose this. Marv made the decision a long time ago, and Bob could not change that. He could only be there at the end of it. Marv doesn't walk out of that room. Bob doesn't flinch. He keeps wiping the bar. The game is still on. Nobody notices. Torres comes back one more time. He has questions about Eric Deeds. Eric is missing. Torres is smart enough to know what missing usually means in this neighborhood. He sits across from Bob and lays out what he knows: the robbery, the Chechens, Eric, glory days. And then he asks Bob directly, "Did you kill Eric Deeds?" Bob says no. Torres pauses. He says, and this is important, he says he believes him. But then he asks the other question, the one he's been saving. Did you kill Glory Days? Richard Whelan, 10 years ago. Bob looks at Torres, and then Bob says something extraordinary. He tells Torres what happened. Not a confession, not a legal statement, just the truth, told plainly to a man who asked. Bob killed Glory Days a decade ago, in this neighborhood, because Glory Days was going to hurt someone Bob cared about. And Bob made a decision, the same way he makes all his decisions, quietly, completely, without panic. Torres sits with that for a long moment. He looks at Bob, he looks around the bar, he looks through the window at the neighborhood, and then he gets up and leaves. No arrest, no charges, just a detective who understands that certain things will never go to court, not because justice failed, but because justice, in places like this, has a different shape. The bar is quiet a few nights later. The Super Bowl is over. The money moved. The Chechens are satisfied. Chavka tells Bob that the bar is his now, not Marv's, not the Chechens, Bob's. He can run it, keep the name, keep the stools, keep the dim lights. Bob nods. He walks home. Rocco is waiting, healthy now, full grown, standing at the door with the particular joy that dogs have, completely indifferent to everything that happened this week, just glad the person they love is home. Bob sits down on the floor, lets Rocco climb on him, and for a moment, just a moment, something crosses his face. Not happiness exactly, more like relief. The relief of a man who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and has finally found the one thing in the world that doesn't require him to explain himself. Here's what the drop is really about, and this is the part worth sitting with. It's not about crime. It's not about Brooklyn. It's about the gap between who we look like and who we are. Bob Saganovsky spent his whole life being invisible, on purpose, quiet, harmless, forgettable. Not because he was weak, because he had already done the most dangerous thing a person can do. He had looked at himself clearly, completely, without excuses, and decided to keep the parts that could be controlled. Eric Deeds looked at Bob and saw nothing. He saw a bartender with a stray dog and a soft voice. He saw someone to push around. He saw a door that would open. And Bob, without raising his voice, without making a speech, without ever once showing his hand, let Eric keep believing that, right up until the moment it didn't matter anymore. The most dangerous people in any room aren't the ones making noise. They're the ones watching you make it. Bob watched for a very long time. Eric Deeds just ran out of time.